Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. In a world of abundant water resources in form of oceans, rivers, ice caps and underground aquifers, potable water is often limited in consumption, especially in parts of Africa, where millions of people are faced with growing environmental challenges. Popular rhythm and blues sensation Boyz II Men must have been prophets when they released the song titled Water Runs Dry in 1994. The same year apartheid ended in South Africa, perhaps the song wasn't just for love ballad, but an indicator of a sign of things to come for the city of Cape Town. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on water scarcity situation in South Africa, Cape Town, ahead of Day Zero? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We take a report now, and Africa Today will be right back. Welcome on board.
50 litres of water per person per day. As
Cape Town, South Africa is currently suffering a water crisis. The Tea Water Slough Dam, whose reservoir was once Cape Town's biggest provider, has less than 10% of water it provides. And the authority says most taps would be turned off if combined water storage level of all dams fall below 13.5%. While city officials have informed residents that they may likely be without any water on April the 12th. Several people are trying to prepare for the Day Zero scenario where their taps would run dry and they are left with no water. For weeks now, residents have been forming long lines to collect water every day. Many are stockpiling supplies, fearing that even graver situations await.
I think the prospect of Day Zero in a city of 4 million people is really frightening, because if Day Zero comes and nobody's prepared, there's going to be panic. There are other cities that have come very close during drought conditions to having no water. Sao Paulo in Brazil is one of those. But I think to make sure that all of Cape Town survives Day Zero and everybody helps each other to get through this crisis, it doesn't become a catastrophe, is the challenge for us Cape Townians to deal.
If Cape Town runs out of water having gone through severe droughts, it will become the first major city in the world to run out of water. To get through the impending crisis, residents would need to go to collection point for a daily ration of 25 litres. Starting from February the 1st, the city lowered the daily allowance for residents from 87 litres down to 50 litres.
Much of the equipment has been delivered in early December and work continued in most of December, so that work is progressing well. With our efforts in bringing new water online and combined efforts of citizens reducing their consumption dramatically, we can collectively avoid a Day Zero.
While the city is putting measures in place to ease the tension, it has advised residents to conserve supplies.
Welcome back. In less than 100 days, Cape Town, a South African city of about 4 million people, could run out of water in what officials call Day Zero. The city's massive reservoirs are drying up after a few years of drought relating to the nightmares often caused by climate change and a growing population. Joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Jerry Ozo, a geologist and coincidentally one of the producers of Africa Today. And on Skype, I have Dr. Anthony Turton, renowned South African environmental advisor and a member of Trustee of Water Stewardship Council of Southern Africa. Good to have you gentlemen on the program.
Thank you very much.
Now let me begin with, all right, great. Let me begin with you now, Dr. Anthony. Let's talk about this situation in Cape Town. How possible is it for a city like Cape Town to be without water?
It's a complicated story. It's not a straightforward, simple story. But in its simple version, it comes down to the fact that there's been a lot of political activity, and it's really a political problem more than a technical problem. So, in a nutshell, it comes down to a dispute between two major political parties, one that controls the national government, the national departments in government responsible for providing water, and the other political party is a local party that controls the city and in fact the province of Western Cape. So at its very roots, it's a profoundly political problem.
Why do you think it's political? Because people really do not have water around the city in Cape Town. I mean, I saw videos where people had to queue to find water. So how could this be political? For what reason?
Well, it's just a deep-seated political rivalry, and I think we have a situation where maybe the political leaders have in fact become disconnected from the people that follow them. And certainly we're seeing a huge amount of political fallout now, political blowback, because the citizens are just increasingly becoming very frustrated with their leadership. And it's my view that after this crisis has come and gone, I believe there will be a fundamental change in the political landscape of the country, and there will be a fundamental change in the way that water has been managed.
All right, now, Jerry, let's look at the severity of the case in Cape Town. From the reports, we hear that it's climate change and also the growing population in Cape Town.
Absolutely.
But you're a geologist.
Yes.
How can we, put this down? How can we understand this clearer?
Naturally, the Earth itself, it's made up of about 80% of water. But unfortunately, 90% of the 80% of water the Earth is made up of is actually saline. So it makes the water unfit because ocean water is very, very high in chloride content. Okay. So it makes the water unfit. So if 90% of the 80% of water is unfit for consumption, so we have about 5% being locked up in the ice cap, so human beings have just 4% to juggle with. So it is very, very difficult to assess this 4% because there are geological processes that determines how do you assess potable water. If you look at the geology of Cape Town, for instance, it's made up of sandstones, it's made up of granitic rocks. So naturally, granitic rocks and sandstones do not have a high yield water capacity, except if there are fractures, except if there are fault lines. So when geologists come on board, they need to determine these fault lines and structures, and in most cases, they are not often sufficient. So that means that the municipal water supply in Cape Town is basically from the dams, from the river channels to the catchment and the artificial dam created by the government. And from the research that we have done, Cape Town itself has about six major dams for the municipal water supply. And with the growing climate change, with the severe droughts and low precipitation in terms of rainfall, because most of these dams, they get their major recharge from rainfall. So with low precipitation,
and even the country doesn't the region hasn't had rain for about 3 years.
Exactly.
Now.
Low rainfall, that's the low precipitation. Then with the growing population, because Cape Town is about 4 million, and you have low precipitation, that means low storage, because the total capacity of all the dams in Cape Town is about 870 megaliters. But as we speak right now, we have about 26% of that total now. So you can see the consequence of the low precipitation and the low, and the low storage with the increasing population.
I'm talking about the increasing population here because right now the people are really jostling for water, and the municipality has cut down supply of water by half, where each resident or each South African in Cape Town is entitled to 50 liters of water.
Absolutely.
And it will still come down to at least 6 gallons before day zero. That's in April 12th or so. Between now and then, how can the people manage? Because you're talking about washing, you're talking about bathing, you're talking about cooking, talking about different things altogether. So how can you manage so much little of water, amount of water, till day zero?
Well, I think the government are actually doing their bits to make sure that they actually manage the situation. But the truth must be told, geologically, I think the people of the Cape have to pray for
The rain.
You understand?
So the rain is the solution here.
The rain is the solution. Although they have been talking about desalination, they've been talking about extracting water from the aquifers I told you about. But the problem with desalination is that desalination is actually a very, very expensive project, because if you are talking desalination, that means you are talking about converting ocean water to fresh water, which is very, very expensive, very, very expensive. If you want to construct a desalination plant, for instance, for about 300,000 people, it's going to cost you about $300 million. All
right, I'm afraid I have to hold your thought now. I know you have a lot to tell me now, but let's quickly go on. The short break you're watching Africa Today. We've been looking at the water scarcity situation in Cape Town, South Africa, ahead of day 0. Welcome back. Cape Town relies on 6 main reservoirs for its drinking water. Together, these reservoirs can store about 870,000 megalitres of water. And after back-to-back years of severe drought, these reservoirs hold just 26% of that total. Well, Cape Townians have been urged to limit their water use to just 50 litres of water per day, and this could eventually reduce to just 25 litres when the taps are turned off in April. Dr. Anthony, I can imagine this can be very severe for those in Cape Town right now, but if you look at this critically in the eye of a scientist, what will be the best way to handle the situation right now?
Yes, okay, the situation is clearly a dire situation, but it's not one that is insoluble. It's as I said earlier on, it's the politicians that have slowed down the process, but the problem is entirely soluble. I think that the future of Cape Town is going to be stand on 3 different elements of a strategy. And the first element of the strategy will be about the recovery of water from waste. The second element of the strategy would be the desalination of seawater. And the third element of the strategy would be about the conjunctive use of groundwater, where you abstract groundwater during periods of drought, and then you recharge the aquifer by putting water in from the surface during periods of abundance. Now, these technologies are all out there. They're all being used, mainstream application. And let me just give you an example. What people need to understand, what's unique about Cape Town, what makes it different to other parts of the world, is that Cape Town is a winter rainfall area. So the problem in Cape Town is the same as the problem in Perth, in Western Australia, the same as in Adelaide South, the same as in Chile, in Southern California, and in the Mediterranean basin, is that you get rainfall in the winter months, so you have to store it for the summer months when people need it, and that is the problem. It's not that there has not been rain over the last year, it's that the rainfall has been less, and the rainfall is falling in the winter months, so it has to be stored. So if you take, for example, the city of Perth, there's 1.2 million people, and they have got a wastewater recovery where they recover water from their sewage. 120 megalitres of water every day is recovered to the highest quality of water you can imagine. Now, if Cape Town's got 4 million people, if you apply the same mathematics, you get 400 megalitres of water per day that can be recovered from waste, from sewage. Now, Cape Town at the moment is surviving on 600 megalitres a day. So that's 2/3 of the current level of water needed could quite conceivably come from wastewater. So when you talk about desalination, is it expensive or is it not expensive? Well, that is relative. At the moment, the cost is coming down to just above $1 per kiloliter. That's $1 per cubic meter of desalinated water. And that is quite comparative, quite competitive with, for example, the cost of groundwater or the cost of not having any water at all. You must remember we're dealing with a sophisticated, diversified economy, so it's not just a question of a subsistence economy. And you're talking about big businesses, big factories that might have to close down if they don't get water. So then it comes down to the cost of doing business.
Talking about cost of doing business, what do you think could be the likely implications in terms of economy now in Cape Town, knowing that it has the largest population in South Africa?
Well, yeah, okay, Cape Town doesn't have the largest population Gauteng does, but Cape Town certainly has a sizable population. I think there are 3 big things that are happening, and I think the first thing that's happening is that the political landscape will change fundamentally after this event. So your current ruling parties will no longer be there. There'll be a completely different architecture of governance. The second thing that's happening is that the public is now woken up and they're getting increasingly angry. So you're going to start seeing private initiatives become more and more viable. And indeed, we're seeing a lot of big financial companies, etc., getting involved now in bringing some of these things to fruition. And then I think the third thing that's going to happen is that you're going to start seeing the emergence of this new paradigm, a paradigm of water management, which you call the paradigm of abundance. And that paradigm of abundance is based on technology and capital coming into the space to enable the recycling of sewage and the recovery of water from the ocean, but also the conjunctive use of groundwater. All of those things are technology dependent, and all of those technologies are becoming more and more affordable. So it comes down to the fact, what is the price that someone's willing to pay for a unit of water? That becomes the viable cost. Then you've got other issues in that, but basically, it's an entirely soluble problem.
Jerry, from what he's just said, it's quite a lot. But what would you have to chip into?
What
he just contributed?
I just want to say that he's actually correct. When he talked about we look at the opportunity cost of having a desalination, and you look at what we stand to gain, irrespective of the fact that it is very, very expensive. In terms of sewage, recycling sewage water. But what about this is a wake-up call for developing countries like in the sub-Saharan Africa, who battling economic hardship. Then I think it's a wake-up call for sub-Saharan African countries to actually, take cue for what is happening in Cape Town right now, and try as much as possible to let us conserve our aquifer. Like, for instance, in Lagos, Nigeria, for instance.
Aquifer is like the local water supply.
Yeah, aquifer is it's like a rock type in the underground water where you get in the underground where you get water from. So if you want to drill a borehole, you need to penetrate the aquifer. So the aquifer in the Lagos area, especially on the island, is actually getting polluted. So due to saline intrusion, due to indiscriminate sinking of boreholes. So, and I think it's right time for sub-Saharan African countries to, to be careful and take a cue from what is happening in Cape Town, so that we'll start knowing how to
deal with this.
Exactly.
But if we were to look at this scenario very, very, widely now, what do you think could be the possible scenario of this issue, of this matter spreading to other parts in Southern Africa? Because it doesn't just stop there in Cape Town, does it?
Absolutely, especially considering the fact that we have the issue of global warming and climate change, and most of the aquifers, the major recharge is from precipitation. The major recharge, because precipitation, that's rainfall, it's a very, very important part of the ecosystem, and it's a very, very important part of the water cycle. The water in the rivers, the water in the ocean is being evaporated and then recondensed back, then turn into rain and come back to us. Then it percolates into the aquifer, and that's where we get our fresh water from. So with the intense, with intense climate change and the human activities in terms of the exhaustion of carbon, the ozone depletion in terms of global warming. So I think that African countries, and especially why I'm more particular about African countries, is because getting potable water is actually very, very expensive, and we don't have that capacity to actually add water problem to the loads of problems that we already have in Africa in terms of economic hardship and huge infrastructural deficits and political unrest. So I think it's a wake-up call for everybody to actually.
All right. Dr. Anthony, to finally wrap up with you, what would be the role of the people in Cape Town now? What do you think they can do to not only help themselves, but also those around them and the government? What can they do now for the people of Cape Town?
Well, I think the people are starting to do some very interesting things. There's a lot of innovation coming out. Amazing how people invent things when they're looking at down the barrel of a gun. So there's a lot of innovation happening, and what I'm starting to see also is people are turning back into communities, and they're starting to develop a new kind of sense of community, a culture of community, which I think is a very, very welcome thing, because in South Africa, with our high levels of crime, we've tended to build high barriers between the different houses, so we don't talk to our next door neighbors very often. And this is forcing people now to go back into that situation. When it comes to government, I think government is slowly losing the control of the situation, because I'm increasingly getting evidence from a range of people, from business people all the way down to ordinary private citizens, that they're just doing their own thing, and they are increasingly not concerned about what the government can do or will do, even by way of regulation. So that's also going to be a very interesting phenomenon to watch, because government can lose control, and this is not in our collective interest. We need good government, we need stable government. We need a place that can attract capital, so we can have investment and job creation. These things all go hand in hand, and these are all being tested at the moment.
But what do you think lies ahead, if at all this is not well managed?
Well, as a professional person, I've been confronted with the moral dilemma, if you like, of a scientist with a moral conscience. And at what point in time does a scientist have to now say that I believe that we are going to crash, because we must now brace for a hard landing? So I'm at that point now where certainly many of my colleagues are in consensus, we are going to crash. And so when we crash, the most prudent thing to do now is to tell the passengers in the aeroplane that you must adopt the brace position, because we're now going to come in hard. And the objective then is to try and minimize the damage and keep as many people as possible alive. That I think is the immediate short-term priority. After that, once survival is taken care of, then we can start talking about other things, like bringing in emergency water. And I believe it might well become an international thing, because I personally don't see that the South African government has the capacity to deal with this, simply by virtue of the fact that what's happening in Cape Town is also about to happen in East London and in Port Elizabeth and possibly in Durban. So it's not just the one city, it's a number of cities. And I don't believe that the South African government actually has the capacity to deal with all of these.
All right, let's leave it at that and hope that the government and also others concerned do something needful for the people, or the people rather do something good for themselves, as the situation is really, really dire right now in South Africa, Cape Town. Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony, for your contributions on Africa Today. So now, Jerry, let's quickly wrap up the show with you. If you were to take this home now, what could be, or what do you think could be the resultant effect from this experience in Cape Town? Well,
the resultant effect from Cape Town, what I think will be the resultant effect is that it's going to lead to, it can lead to a kind of unrest, because if people denying people water, it's like denying people right to life. Water is life. There's virtually anything that we can do without water. So the resultant effect about people not getting water might lead to people coming to the street, because we are having reports now that that some people are already joining up for protests in South Africa. So I think the government have to be very, very proactive, and to make sure that they go ahead with their plans of desalination and their plans of extracting water from the aquifers. What I really think, because he talked about the political conspiracy about what is happening in South Africa, because this drought did not just happen today. It did not just happen last year. It has been, it was for a period of about 3 years. And the water shortage in the dam was already depleting. Yeah, exactly. So I think that if the government had been proactive enough, by adopting the strategies of sourcing for water from other sources, like the aquifers, like the recycling, of wastewater, I think it will go a long way.
Well, let's be hopeful that a solution will be found,
yeah,
and
exactly.
of course the rains,
the
heavens will give way and the rains will come down.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Jeremiah Ozo, for your contributions on Africa Today. I'm my co-producer of the show.
I'm so honored.
It's a pleasure.
I'm so honored.
Now, at a time when global demand for water is expected to grow by 50% in less than 15 years, progressive thinking must match intensive actions ensuring that everyone leaves behind a renewable water footprint. South Africa's Cape Town is racing against time to deal with the worst drought in the city's history. A message to the rest of Africa that unless there is a sustainable balance between stored water and underground water, the way people view the essential commodity may soon change forever. Well, that is our package for today, but don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one, I am Esther Mokwariola, and always remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.